Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, dated 27th December 2025. Today again we will be discussing some important topics that has appeared in today's The Hindu and the Indian Express newspapers which are relevant for your examination. So in the initial two articles we have included two mains practice questions which will be useful for your upcoming mains examination. In our first topic, we'll try to understand the rising threat of invasive mosquito species and its impact on the human health. After that, in our second topic, we'll take a snapshot of the economy of 2025 and the future outlook for the 2026. After that, in our simplified section, we'll take up 5 articles and we'll try to explain them in simplest language possible to enrich your understanding of the newspapers. Additionally, we have also incorporated some prelims pointers which is going to be crucial for your upcoming prelims and mains examinations. So have a look on them also and stay tuned. So let's start our discussion with the first topic, that is invasive mosquito species and India's malaria elimination target. The context of this topic is that in today's The Hindu newspaper, there is an article which is saying that India has made a target to eliminate malaria by year 2030. But there are certain challenges which India needs to overcome to achieve that particular target of eliminating malaria by 2030. For example, the challenges like asymptomatic cases where the patients are not showing any kind of symptoms, the cross-border spread that we are witnessing, especially because of the globalized world in which we are living, the persistent pockets in the Odisha and some of the northeastern states where we are still witnessing a huge amount of the malarial cases. And this particular topic is related to your GS paper 2 health. So malaria, which is a life-threatening disease mainly caused by the parasite Plasmodium, and generally it is spread through the infected female Anopheles mosquito. Now what we again need to understand, this Plasmodium word, it is derived from the Greek word where the literal meaning is that the organism which is not having a fixed shape or which is molded. So when for the first time this parasite was seen under the microscopic condition, it was seen that it was not having any fixed shape, and that is the reason this genus of parasites was caused as the Plasmodium. Also, this particular genus mainly causes the malaria. Now again what we need to understand that here that there are various species which caused this malaria. There are total 5 Plasmodium species, but 2 of them are mainly causing the overall infections that happen in the major parts of the world. For example, one is the parasite falciparum, and this is the most fatal. It causes most of the deaths that are happening. For example, as per this World Malaria Report of 2024 which is released by WHO, in India in year 2023, there were more than 2 lakh infections of malaria and it led to death of more than 83 persons. And majorly, it is because of the Plasmodium falciparum species of the Plasmodium genus. Then we have the Plasmodium vivax also. So another feature of this particular species is that it is generally dormant in the liver, that it subsidizes and the symptoms of in the patients also subsidizes, but there can be recurrent infections or complications that can happen at the later stage because it becomes dormant in the liver. And then slowly and gradually it can also become drug resistant. So, and because of which whatever the first line drugs that are generally given to the person which is infected by the malaria, for example chloroquine or the ACT drugs etc., that becomes ineffective against this particular Plasmodium vivax. Now here we were saying that there are certain invasive mosquitoes which are again creating complications for the India to achieve this target. What exactly is the invasive mosquito? So there are certain mosquito species which are limited to a certain region itself, which are native to certain region. But because of the globalized world in which we are living, let's suppose because of the trade, transportation, etc., this mosquito which was limited to this area itself also spread to other parts of the world. Then it can create certain complications for the other reasons. Why? Because let's suppose there is a mosquito, female Anopheles, which was causing the major spread in India. So India has already done a lot of research and development. India has already developed a lot of the insecticides or the vaccines to prevent that. But when a new invasive mosquito species is coming to India, then it might further pose challenge for the health authorities, because again they will have to start from the scratch. They will again have to develop new kind of insecticides as well as the vaccines or the ACT drugs etc., which can help us in preventing these infections and the mortalities related to that. For example, and one of this invasive species is Anopheles stephensi, right? So it is generally native to the South Asia and Middle East regions, but now it is causing infections in certain African countries, as well as it is also visible in certain other urban centers, especially in the water tanks, etc. So because of this new invasive mosquito, which is immune to certain insecticides, for example pyrethroid, which was being used in the mosquito repellents, etc. So when it is also already immune to those insecticides, it will be very difficult for us to curtail this effectively. Also, the diagnosis of this malaria is generally done with the help of blood test and other malarial tests that are done. Then the treatments, generally anti-malarial drugs are given, and here the chloroquine, artemisinin based combination therapies, which is the therapy based on the multiple drugs which are given to the malarial patients, so that it becomes much effective. Also, the drug resistant to this ACT and anti-malarial drugs, which is being visible now, is a new threat that we are seeing. Also, the symptoms, the people having the malaria, they have the fever, chills, headache, anemia. At times it can also lead to organ failures. There are certain vaccines which has been also already developed. For example, R21 matrix vaccine, which is being manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. So this can also help us in that infection. Then WHO has made a target for 75% of reduction of malaria by 2025 and 90% reduction by 2030. Also, India has made a target to make India malaria free by 2027, and elimination. Malaria free means transmission has stopped, and elimination by 2030, that we are not having any new cases, or no cases are present now. And this Anopheles stephensi, which was the invasive species which we were discussing, it is known to transmit malaria parasites to the human, and it was first detected in Marasabit and Turkana in 2022. So it was limited to that region, but now it is visible in certain regions of Africa, for example in Kenya, and it is reported to resistant all classes of insecticides that are used against the adult malaria vectors. For example, one is pyrethroid, which we were discussing, and it is also used in the all out, etc., that we generally use at our homes. So if this is resistant to that, so that means that mosquito repellent or other type of insecticides will become ineffective against this. Also, it breeds in man-made water containers such as tanks, barrels, rooftop water storage, which is more visible in the urban centers. So because of this new invasive species, urban centers can become hotspot for the malaria. Also, it thrives in urban and semi-urban environments because of the man-made water availability. Also, its spread is viewed as a significant emerging threat that could undermine whatever the malaria elimination targets has been made by the WHO or by the India itself. Also, the recommended measure include the eliminating standing water, improving water storage, indoor residual spraying, and the using mosquito nets. So whatever that we were using earlier, so we will have to use, for example, the still water, etc., that are in our coolers, that are in our tanks, etc., or the sewage, etc., where again there is water that is standstill, that needs to be properly taken care of, so that we can curtail this spread. Now, this World Malaria Report 2024, which is released by WHO, which we were discussing. So here, as per the global finding, the disease burden, that the report says that there were 263 million malaria cases in year 2023, and which was an increase of 11 million from the year 2022. And one of the major reason why, because this is majorly a tropical disease. Plus, with the more cases of incessant rainfall that we are witnessing, climate change that we are witnessing, so again that is leading to more spread, as well as the new complications are coming to eliminate this. Also, there were more than 5 lakh deaths related to malaria, but it was declined from 6,22,000, which was the data of the deaths related to malaria in 2020, and in 2030 it was 5,97,000 deaths, and majority of that is happening in the African regions. Also, the geographic concentration, that you can say that WHO African region, it is contributing around 94% of the global cases, as well as 95% of the global deaths that are happening related to malaria. The top 5 countries which are contributing to more than 52% of the malarial cases are Nigeria contributing 26%, Democratic Republic of Congo 13%, Uganda 5%, Ethiopia 4% and Mozambique 4%. Another thing that you can relate with this particular data is that malaria is something that if the people will not have proper housing, if people will not have the proper facilities to have a safe life, so they may be more prone, because these mosquitoes which are there, they are generally found in the regions having not proper cleanliness, having improper facilities of the sewage, etc. And you see that in these African regions, the poverty rate is very high. People do not have even proper facilities of 2 meals in a day. They do not have proper facilities of the housing. More than that, some of the regions like Democratic Republic of Congo, DR Congo, etc. or Sudan, these are the regions where a lot of civil wars are also going on. There are also various disturbances that keeps on happening in these regions, because of which people migrate from one place to another. And that is the reason they become more prone for the bite of the mosquitoes, and that is one of the reasons why we see more cases of malaria in these regions. Also, the elimination progress of the WHO target. Since 2015, 9 countries are now certified malaria free with no new cases, and Egypt was also certified recently in 2024. Also, the interventions that they have rolled out, the RTS and R21 vaccines, that has also led to improved coverage in the endemic regions in the Africa, which were gradually giving more number of malaria cases to the overall global burden of the malaria. Also, if you see the India specific findings, that historical turnaround that was visible, especially because of the interventions done by the central and the state governments. For example, at independence in year 1947, we were having more than 7.5 crore cases per year related to malaria. And more than 8 lakh deaths were happening because of the malaria itself. Why? Because there was poor awareness related to malaria, there was poor availability of the drugs, vaccines, plus the poverty, the lack of proper housing was also some of the reasons why we were witnessing this much of cases and the deaths. And by 2023, we have seen more than 90% of reduction in the cases, and deaths has came down to a historic low of 83. Also, the recent trends with regard to the turnaround can be also visible from the data of 2015 to 2023, that the cases related to malaria were 11,69,261 in year 2015, and now it has declined to almost 2,27,564 cases. Also, deaths has also seen a 80% decline, that in year 2015, the 384 deaths were reported related to malaria, but now it has declined to 83 deaths only. Also, this ABER, that is the annual blood examination rate, so that has also improved to 11.62. So here, because of this, what we are witnessing, that there is better surveillance and early detection, that because there is more pathologies that are there, so with more diagnosis that is happening, more these blood tests, etc. facilities that are available, now people get to know about the malaria infection in a time bound manner, and that also helps us in reducing the infections as well as deaths related to this. Because let's suppose there is an infected person with the malaria, and he or she is not having any idea that he is already or she is already infected with the malaria, and if there is a mosquito bite that is happening, that mosquito can also become infected with that malaria, and that can also lead to spread, because that mosquito will also bite other persons. Also, the global recognition about the India's efforts, for example, the India exited the World Health Organization's high burden to high impact group in 2024. This is the country-led global malaria response framework, especially with regard to the countries having the high burden of the malaria. So because of the reduction that we witnessed in the cases and the deaths we have came out of that. But there are certain challenges in eliminating malaria. For example, the rising cases of the drug resistant, the resistance malaria that we are witnessing, drug resistance parasites that we are witnessing. And this is not the case with only this malaria. This is this overall antimicrobial resistance that we are witnessing, especially with regard to the poor awareness, poor tracking of the patients, especially with regard to the lack of proper research and development for the new strains that are coming. So here, the rising resistance to RT machine based combination therapies. These are the compounds and these are the shorter acting drugs. And here it can be extended, this needs to be extended beyond disappearance of the parasites to prevent the recrudescence. Let's suppose there is a person who was infected by the malaria and he was having fever, chills, headache, body pain, etc. And after taking this drugs, combination of drugs, the symptoms subside, but this person will have to continue with this at least for the recommended period by the doctor, so that we can see the complete recrudescence of that particular parasite from the human body. Because if the person will not complete the whole regimen of that particular drug, then that parasite can again become drug resistant. And this can also be prevented by combining 3 to 5 day regimen of these artemisinin compounds with one long acting drug like mefloquinine. And also it is indicated by WHO in acute uncomplicated resistant falciparum malaria, which is one of the species that causes the malaria. Now here we can see that if the person is having the prolonged infections, it can also lead to higher transmissions and mortality, and that can again put a question mark on the elimination targets that we have already made. Also, the insecticide resistance that we are witnessing, for example, in Anopheles mosquito, they are developing resistance to commonly used insecticide, for example, phythorid, which is one of the common insecticide. So here we can see that this phythorid that is there, and renofluthrin is again India's indigenously developed patented pyrethroid. India's indigenously developed is renofluthrin, and it is developed by one of this company which makes this mosquito repellent, and the actual insecticide name was phythorid. So now, and this is also visible at our homes. I don't know how many of you have seen or observed this, that earlier whatever the mosquito repellents that we were using, they were very effective. The mosquitoes were less visible, but now you can see that mosquitoes are already roaming around that mosquito repellent itself. So that shows that they are becoming resistant to these kind of insecticides, and this is visible in major regions which are one of the hotspots of the malaria. So we also have to come with the better insecticides that can help us in tackling that. And with this, the again burden of the invasive species that we are witnessing, especially for example Anopheles stephensi, these insecticides will further become less effective. Also, the climate change and the ecological factors, for example with rising temperatures and erratic rainfalls, this also expand the mosquito habitats. That for example the Marathwada region in Maharashtra, it is generally, historically it was one of the regions where we were witnessing the drought like conditions, but few months back it saw a historic high rainfall, incessant rainfall happened, and because of which the floods like condition were there in that region, that also led to crop losses. But because of this rainfall, flood like conditions, the water will also be visible in certain pockets. The water storage will be there, and that can be one of the habitats for these mosquitoes. So with the climate change, which is causing the temperature rise and which is also causing the increase or the haphazard rainfall patterns, that is also causing the complications. And also the weak health system and surveillance gaps that are there, for example limited diagnostics, plus the diagnostic that is there, that is also costly, because these kind of blood tests etc are not effectively available in the PHCs, that is primary health center, or the CHC, community health centers, or the government run hospitals. And even for the basic CBC, the private pathology etc cost more than 300-400 rupees, which is quite unaffordable for a majority of the population. So here, because of this high cost of diagnostics, lack of proper availability in the public health centers, it leads to underreporting and low access in the remote areas. And because of this delayed detection and the treatment, it can lead to sustained transmission from one infected person to another infected person and to different regions. Also, the socio-economic and behavioral barriers, for example, the poverty, poor housing, low awareness and migration, this leads to incomplete treatment. This is what we were witnessing in the African regions, that they are majorly war torn. There were various civil conflicts that are going on. So because of which people migrate from one place to another place, they do not have a proper housing facility. And this is the same case in India also, that people, especially let's suppose who are migrating from some of the rural areas to urban centers in search of better job opportunities, the people who are living on the construction sites itself, there we may see a poor condition of living, and they are one of the habitats of the mosquitoes also. And these people who are having that, who do not have the proper resources like the mosquito nets, etc., they also do not have the proper awareness that in case of mosquito bites or some kind of fever, etc., that are coming, they need to consult the doctors. That can lead to consistent infection and consistent transmissions. Also, the vaccine limitations, for example, the new vaccines like RTS, R21, that offer the partial protection and that it require multiple doses. So again, if there will be a poor upkeep, poor tracking of the patients, for example, this COVID portal that came, that was completely tracking the COVID-19 vaccine. Similarly, the portal that was there, especially during the COVID-19 that was there, Arogya Setu, etc. All those were also helping in giving an idea about the patients who have already taken the vaccine, and when you can have the second dose, the facilities where the doses of the vaccines can be available. And the health authorities were also helping in keeping a track of that. They were calling, they were going to the patient's home and they were motivating them to come to the centers and go for the vaccinations. But these cases are not visible with the malaria. If the person is not having awareness with regard to the vaccines, probably they will not be getting that properly. And for example, the another concern is the efficacy of that it doesn't make a person completely prone from any kind of infections that may happen in future. So still it shows only 30 to 40% of efficacy in the children, and they are one of the important prone age groups for the malaria. So that is the reason we need to have more research and development for this to address all the issues comprehensively. Also, then we have the government initiatives which India took to eliminate the malaria effectively. For example, we have the National Framework for Malaria Elimination. So here it was a kind of national vector-borne. Then we have the National Vector-Borne Disease Control Program. So here the National Framework for Malaria Elimination, that provided a complete roadmap to eliminate malaria, and target was also zero indigenous cases by 2030. Then also we have the National Vector-Borne Disease Control Program that provided for integrated prevention, surveillance, treatment of malaria and other vector-borne diseases. So here, whatever the prevention measures that can be taken with regard to the awareness generation, with regard to the distribution of mosquito nets, etc., surveillance, that having a proper check on the people who are already infected, whether they are completing their complete drug regimen or not, and the treatment, that whether already they have completely eliminated that parasite or not, all that were being done with the regular checkups, etc., that were being done. Then we have the National Malaria Control Program. So here it was launched in 1953 to address the major severe impacts of the malaria. For example, it focuses on the three major core activities. For example, the major was that insecticidal residual spraying that happens with the DDT. Now this DDT is one of the major chemical that is used to kill the mosquitoes. The full form is dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, and it is a synthetic organochlorine insecticide that is mainly used in indoor residual spray to kill the adult Anopheles mosquito that is resting on the indoor walls. It is also used in spraying, etc., that we witness in the outside, especially from the government interventions. Also, this program was focusing on the patient treatment, right? Then we have the high burden to high impact initiative. Under this, again, it was initiated in 4 states, especially the Jharkhand and then Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh in 2019, along with the West Bengal. That these were some of the states where we were seeing the huge amount of cases as well as the mortality. So there was a dedicated program to address the issues, especially in these states. Then we have the Malaria Elimination Research Alliance India. Under this, again, it was established by ICMR, that is Indian Council of Medical Research, and it also was collaborating with several other partners on the malaria control research, so that we can come with the new form of insecticides, new form of drugs, etc., that can make it much effective to address the menace of malaria. Now let's see what are the measures that are needed to address the challenges in the elimination of the malaria by the 2030, which is the target by India. So first of all, we need to tackle the drug resistance. So we need to deploy the triple ACTs. Here we are mainly using the two or combination of the ACTs, that is artemisinin based combination therapy. But if the triple ACTs will be used, that will be more effective, especially against the drug resistance parasite. Also, we can rotate the anti-malarial drugs, that instead of limiting ourselves to use of any one drug itself, there can be rotation of the malarial drugs that can happen, especially with regard to the different reasons, and that can also provide us the better therapeutic effect as well as efficacy. And also we can have a better therapeutic efficacy surveillance to get an idea that whatever the ACTs or the anti-malarial drugs that we are using, whether that is providing us proper results or not. Based on that, we can go for the changes in the ACTs or the anti-malarial drugs. Also, whatever the WHO protocols that are being deployed, they needs to be properly maintained with regard to the prevention, surveillance and control to eliminate it in a time bound manner. Also, we need to overcome the insecticide resistance. For example, we can use the next generational ITNs, that are the insecticide treated mosquito nets that are given especially to the migrant persons, poor persons, etc. And they are treated with pyrethroids as well as PBO, that is the piperonil butoxide, which is again one of the insecticides used to treat to curtail the spread of the mosquitoes. And these insecticides can be also rotated along different regions, so that if the mosquitoes become immune or resistant to any one kind of insecticide, this can be effective against that. Also, there is need of integrated vector management, especially with regard to a proper coordination from the urban local bodies, health authorities as well as other government bodies. Also, climate resilient malaria control, for example, early warning systems can be deployed. For example, here these meteorological organization, etc., they keeps on giving an idea about the condition that we will be witnessing with regard to the rainfall. So health authorities can also deploy their resources, their manpower according to that, because majorly these are the periods, especially after the rainfall, where we witness a surge in the cases of the malaria. And it should not be episodic, that after the rainfall happens, after we are witnessing a surge in the malarial cases, only then the health authorities are completing whatever the response that they should do. Rather, it should be a complete integrated response, keeping in mind the earlier targets that were there, earlier prevalence of the malaria was there. Also, we need to go for the disaster and climate adaptation plans, that how we can make our population, citizens immune with the changes in the climate that are happening. For example, CDRI, coalition for the disaster resilient infrastructure that was there. So with the more resilient infrastructure with regard to the disasters, probably we'll be able to tackle that in an effective manner. We also need to strengthen the surveillance and the health systems. For example, universal rapid diagnostic testing can be deployed with the help of the dedicated programs, dedicated these surveys, etc., that can be done. Also, there is need for digital surveillance, what was also used during the COVID-19, that we can keep a track about the people who are already having the vaccines and whether they have completed their anti-malarial drugs course completely or not. Also, we need to increase the higher annual blood examination rate, so that we can identify the people who are having the malaria parasite and we can tackle that effectively. Also, we need to address the socio-economic barriers, especially for the migrants, tribal areas, with mobile clinics. For example, Arogya Mandirs were being established by the central government. Then Delhi government's flagship initiative was Mohalla clinics. So if there will be dedicated clinics available, especially in the unserved or underserved areas, and they will be affordable, these people who are not having the facilities of the diagnostics, etc., they can also get themselves checked. Also, community health workers like ASHA, etc., can be also deployed with proper resources, so that they can also help us in eliminating this menace. Also, behavioral change communication needs to be done. We need to give that civic sense that if there is water which is there, which we are not changing frequently from our coolers, from our water tanks, etc., that this civic sense would prevail. We need to communicate the behavioral changes, we need to nudge them, so that this behavior change can also leads to in achieving this particular target of elimination. Also, we need to optimize the vaccine use. For example, we need to scale up the RTS R21, as these are the complementary tool alongside the vector control and the case management. Only the vaccine, only the insecticide or only the malarial drug is not going to help. A comprehensive approach with the integration from the health authorities with the civil society organizations, community health workers, etc., can help us in eliminating malaria and achieving target by 2030. This is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Moving towards our next topic, that is looking at 2026 economy. The context is that a write-up has appeared presenting the snapshot of Indian economy in today's Indian Express newspaper. And this is related to syllabus of your GS paper 3, growth and development. If you see this data that says that from the IMF, that says that India was the fastest growing economies in 2025 with a forecast of around 6.2%, and this was the projection by IMF for the year 2025. Also, India has become the 4th largest economy in global ranking, and India has surpassed the Japan, and India's economy has achieved $4.187 trillion. If you look at the growth rate, for example, for Q1 of financial year 25-26, the real GDP grew at 7.8%. The difference between real GDP and nominal GDP is that real GDP is adjusted for inflation, that it is calculated at constant price, whereas the nominal GDP is calculated at current prices. Also, this was a 5-quarter high GDP growth rate in Q1 of financial year 25-26. Also, the gross value added was also up by 7.6%, with manufacturing 7.7%, construction 7.6%, and services 9.3%. The nominal GDP also expanded at 8.8%. That means that overall, all the sectors were also powering, and it was not limited to any one sector itself. Also, the S&P, which is a credit rating agency, they also raised India's rating after 18 years, and now in August 14, 2025, the rating of India was raised to BBB. That shows, that further highlights the overall macroeconomic stability of India, and this raise in the rating will also help us in getting better access to fund at the competitive rates. Also, certain growth drivers and the challenges with regard to the economy that we witnessed in year 2025. For example, the domestic demand revival that we witnessed, especially after the COVID-19, that the first case came from China in year 2019, and first case in India was seen in January 2020 from Kerala. And after that, when industrial activity took a halt, especially with regard to the quarantine measures that were there and lockdowns that were there, because of which, when then industrial activities took a halt, people's income was also jeopardized. And when people were not having income, people were not having money in their hands, obviously there was a low demand of the goods and services, because of which again the industrial activities subsidized. Because when people are not demanding goods and services, why exactly the industries will produce the goods and services? But after that, because of the various fiscal and the monetary measures, the fiscal and the monetary policy, fiscal policy of the government and monetary policy of the central government, the economy revived, especially with regard to the expenditure that was done by the central government, especially with regard to various other measures that were taken by the central government. For example, there is now no tax up till 12 lakhs. So when there are tax exemptions that are given up till 12 lakhs, people will have more money in their hands, because earlier they were giving more income tax, but now whatever the amount that they will be saving on account of giving less income tax, that they will be spending in the economy. So that will lead to more consumption expenditure, that will lead to more demand of goods and services, and ultimately that will also help us in reviving industrial activities, because to fulfill this increased demand of goods and services, the industries will start producing more goods and services. So this private final consumption expenditure, that has also increased, and that is visible from this fact that it contributes around 50 to 60% of GDP now. And this sustained GDP growth requires consumption-led momentum. Why? Because let's suppose GDP, which is the total monetary value of all the goods and services that are produced in the domestic territory during a financial year, there are three methods with the help of which it can be calculated. For example, one is the value added method, which takes into account all the value addition which is done by all the sectors for all the economic activity. Then we have the income method, which incorporates all the income which is generated by the four factors of production, that is land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. For land we get rent, for labor we get wages, and for capital we give interest, and for entrepreneurship we get profits. So if we are adding all these four factors for four incomes which are generated by the four factors of production, that is your income method. Then we have the expenditure method, where we add all the expenditure which is done by the households, then we have the private investment, then we have the government spending, and then we have the net of exports. So if household expenditure is increasing, that will also contribute to increase GDP growth rate, sustained GDP growth rate. If private investment is increasing, that will also contribute to more GDP growth rate, because to fulfill this increased demand of the consumption expenditure, the private will also invest more to increase more production of goods and services. Government spending will increase, that will also contribute to more increased GDP growth rate. So because of all this, we will see a sustained GDP growth rate, and that will also contribute to overall GDP growth rate. If you see the current status, the urban demand, it is seeing the gradual recovery. What we have witnessed that in the late 2025, the rural demand saw a momentum, but recovery was not witnessed in the urban areas. But with more wage growth that we are witnessing, with the rationalization of taxes, etc., with the GST 2.0 reforms that were done, where the tax slabs were rationalized and now some of the products will become much more affordable, now we are seeing the urban recovery also. Also, the rural demand, that is weak due to sustained real farm incomes, that the farm incomes, especially in the rural areas, the agricultural income, that didn't see an uptrend, especially because of the poor wage growth in Manrega wages, especially because of the poor income in the agricultural sector. Also, we are witnessing erratic monsoons, because of which again the overall food grain production also didn't see an uptrend, because of which again we didn't see an increase in the income of the rural farm income in the rural farm income, and because of which again the demand didn't see an uptrend. Also, the high food inflation, which further limited the purchasing power of the people. And there are certain constraints, especially with regard to the economy. For example, the food inflation, which is compressing the discretionary spending. For example, especially the supply chain disruptions, which cause an increase in the food prices, especially for the vegetables, etc. For example, in September 2024, the per kg charges of the tomato reached to more than 100 rupees per kg. In that case, people will not be able to spend at their discretion. And because of which, if there will be decrease in the demand of the consumption, then again we will not be able to see a sustained GDP growth. Also, uneven wage growth. For example, this is the data that you can see, that salary increase, this is the GDP growth rate, and then this is the salary increase, and this is the real wage growth. Real wage growth is the salary increase which is adjusted for the inflation. So if, let's suppose, my income was earlier 100 rupees and I was able to afford a chocolate which was costing 100 rupees, but now because of inflation of because of the impact of the inflation, the cost of this chocolate increased to 110 rupees. So until and unless my salary will increase to 10% to 110 rupees, I will not be able to afford this chocolate. But that is not being seen in the overall economy, that people's income hasn't seen an uptrend as compared to what we were witnessing with regard to the inflation. Also, the informal sector stress, that especially, let's suppose, in the gig economy, that as of now more than 7 million people who are employed in gig economy, and it is projected to increase to around 23 million by year 2030 as per NITI Aayog. But there is inconsistent income, there is lack of proper social security, there are health insurance, etc., that are not available. So along with that, other people who are there in the informal sector, unorganized sector, because of the poor growth in wages, because of lack of income security, there is a stress that is visible. And if there will be inconsistent income, there will be inconsistent consumption expenditure, and which will not help us in achieving the projected GDP growth rate. Also, the investment and the capital formation. Here we have seen that one of the again important part was the private investment. So here if you see the comparison between India and China, so the private consumption contributes around 60.3% to the overall expenditure, to overall GDP in India, whereas in China it is contributing 39.1%, and investment, private investment, is contributing around 41.3%, as compared to in India it is only contributing 30.8%. So here the positive trends are that gross fixed capital formation, that means the total investment, in simple term you can understand, that is improving. The public capital expenditure, or the capital expenditure by government for the building infrastructure, etc., that has also became or gone to an historic high of 3.4% of GDP. And when the public capital expenditure increases, it also leads to an impact of crowding. What exactly is that? Let's suppose government is building an infrastructure, they are building an expressway or the roadway or highway, So when they are building this expressway or highway, and then for that they have done an expenditure that will be called as an capital expenditure if that is being built by the government. But because of this highway, there will be certain hotels that will come, educational institutions, hospitals, and other investment in the form of industry, etc., that will come near that expressway or highway because of the better connectivity that it is providing. That will also lead to more job creation. That will also lead to more household consumption expenditure. Why? The people who are getting jobs, they are having more income, they are having money in their hands that they will be spending. So with the expenditure by the government, there is more investment coming from the private sector, that is called as crowding. Also, the government this capital expenditure acts as this crowding mechanism which we were saying. But there are certain structural weakness. For example, the private investment remain cautious due to global uncertainty that is there, especially the supply chain disruptions that we are witnessing. Especially, let's suppose what we are witnessing, that the tariff that US imposed on India, along with that whatever the retaliatory tariffs that are being used by the other countries, the protectionist measures that are being imposed by countries, especially for example with regard to the export of certain raw materials, etc., which were done by the China. Also, the demand that hasn't seen an uptrend, as well as the inventory levels that are there with the privates that are at a historic high. The capacity utilization of the privates are still not that good, and that is the reason they are hesitant for more investment in the economy. Also, the demand visibility issues, geopolitical risks that are there. For example, let's suppose there are certain companies, let's suppose Gokul Das Export is there, Pearl Global is there, who were dependent on the US market for the export of their commodities in the textile sector. But if there is a increased tariff that is imposed, so obviously they have lost a major market, and in that case they will not be interested to invest more in the economy. Also, the external sector headwinds that are there. For example, the risks are with regard to the slowing global growth that are witnessed. For example, demand of the overall goods and services has seen an decline, especially because of the global uncertainty that are there. Lack of a coherence with regard to the overall geopolitics, or the overall geopolitical scenario. When there is inconsistency that is visible, there are lot of issues, lot of geopolitical risks that are there. So again, it has led to decline in the overall global demand. Also, the protectionism that is being witnessed, especially in the form of tariff and non-tariff measures. For example, tariff measure in the form of tariffs that were imposed by the Trump, or non-tariff measures in the form of, let's suppose, comprehensive border adjustment mechanism, or CBAM, which gives certain regulations with regard to the European Union. So here, if a country wants to export certain products to European Union, let's suppose steel, cement, etc., if their products are not complying with the carbon norms of the European Union, they may be subjected to the extra tax or the extra tariffs. Also, the volatile crude oil prices, and when the volatility is there in the crude oil prices and the transportation sector or other sectors which uses this, also there will be a inconsistency in the prices, and that will also impact the overall demand as well as overall private investment. The capital flow reversal from the tightening global liquidity. For example, whatever the changes that are being done by the US Fed, because of which we are witnessing that the global outflow of the capital is being witnessed. We have seen a historic high selling by the foreign portfolio investors from the India's capital market. Also, India's buffer, for example, India has more than 106 billion of forex reserves which can cover months of imports. Also, managed exchange rate regime, and we are also trying to diversify our export markets. For example, we have signed the free trade agreement with the UK. We are in process to sign the FTA with the United States. And still there are certain vulnerable sectors, for example, pharmaceutical, because India's pharmaceutical export contribute a huge amount to India's overall GDP, as well as we are highly dependent on the export of the generic medicines. With the tightening cases of the regulations, for example, unfortunate deaths happened because of the India's cough syrup, which brings us a bad image, and because of which our exports are also impacted. The auto components, which are dependent on the chips, etc., from the foreign players, foreign markets. Again, if there is global supply chain disruptions that are happening, there is inconsistent supply of the auto components, raw materials, that also complicates the problems for the sector. The engineering goods, IT services, these are some of the sectors which contributes a huge amount in India's export earnings. If there are certain visa restrictions, for example H1 visa rules that change in United States, so again the people who were getting jobs in the IT sector, etc., that might also jeopardize. So India's remittances, etc., that we were getting, that also might be jeopardizing. With regard to the employment and demographic challenge that we are witnessing, for example, the formal sector job creation is improving, informal sector still remains stressed. For example, this is the data from PRS legislative research, which says that region and percentage employed in the public sector in India, the national average is 6% only. And with regard to the states, that some of the most populous state is still not having a greater percentage of the people employed in the public sector, especially the Uttar Pradesh, Bihar or Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, etc. Also, with regard to the Indian states by employment in informal sector, the national informal sector average is 24.2%, and still the major states like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, etc., are the states where major population is employed in informal sector, and where again we have an inconsistent income and other issues. The structural issues is the quality of the employment deficit. For example, people are underemployed. You can see that there are stories that are posted on the social media that people who lost their jobs, who lost their businesses in the COVID-19 are doing the jobs of the Rapido or the Swiggy delivery executives, etc. And manufacturing sector has still not contributed because India saw a complete movement from the agriculture to the complete surpass from agriculture to services, and manufacturing is still lagging behind. We were not still able to achieve the required employment contribution. It is still contributing around 15%, less than 15%. The risk is that if we will not be able to achieve the proper potential, or we will not be able to harness the demographic dividend, the high working age population, that may convert into demographic disaster. So the other fiscal monetary policy trade-offs that are happening, for example, the fiscal side, the commitment to the fiscal consolidation, that slowly and gradually government is reducing their fiscal deficits, and this is visible from the data from financial year 25 also. The limited space for the revenue heavy welfare expansion, the focus is on targeted subsidies, for example direct benefit transfer that we are witnessing, the rationalization that was witnessed in the PEHL, that is LPG subsidy that was being given to the people. Also the asset creating expenditure, for example national infrastructure pipeline, national monetization plan, PM Gati Shakti, etc., that this were leading to the asset creating or the high capital expenditure, and that has also led to more crowding of private investment. The monetary side, the RBI is balancing that they are doing. For example, from January 2025 they are continuously cutting the repo rate, because of which the people's EMIs will reduce, people's loan will reduce, credit card bill will reduce, and the privates will also be able to get access to the loans at cheaper rate, and all this is going to boost overall consumption, overall private investment. Also this is going to support the overall GDP growth rate and whatever the targets that are given to the monetary policy committee to maintain the inflation rate to 4 plus minus 2%. Also the likely calibrated stance, not aggressive easing, that RBI or the central bank is doing, that they are keeping a caution even while going for the cutting of the repo rate. But what exactly is the path ahead? First of all, we need to further boost the demand side. For example, we need to strengthen the rural income with the reforms in the MSP. For example, we can diversify the MSP, especially for the, let's suppose, horticulture products and other products, so that the people who are dependent on the agriculture, for example 46.1% is the employment generation by the agriculture sector. So these people who are dependent on the agriculture, if they will be getting better income with the help of MSP reforms, that will actually help us in boosting the overall rural demand. Also, we can control the food inflation by supply side measures. For example, we need to improve the logistics sector, which still contributes around, logistics cost is around 14 to 18%, which is very high as per the global average. So for example, Kishan Rail was there. For example, government is further building various infrastructure. If the logistics cost will reduce, so the supply side interventions, if that will be done in a proper manner, so shelf life of the products will also be improved. Also, we can expand that targeted welfare, not the blanket subsidy. For example, fertilizer subsidy, which is leading to more than 1.67 lakh crore as per budgetary estimate of 2025-26. But again, there are a lot of leakages. There is lack of proper targeting. So all this can be rationalized so that that the real benefits of the government expenditure can be seen. Also, with regard to the investment side, we can de-risk the private investment through the policy certainty. We can also accelerate the national infrastructure pipeline. We need to also deepen the corporate bond market, because as of now, let's suppose any company is not getting the loan or the capital at the competitive rate from the let's suppose banks, etc. So if there will be a flourishing bond market, which are debt instruments, so the person can also get a proper debt in the form of bonds at a competitive rate, which can also fulfill their capital needs. Also, with regard to the external sector, export diversification beyond US and China. For example, we need to see certain countries in the Africa, Southeast Asia, etc., especially also in our neighborhoods. So if we will diversify our export destination, we will be at a competitive edge, as well as we will have a strategic advantage. Also, trade agreements with growth markets that are there, we need to finalize that also in a time bound manner, especially with regard to the Mexico, Brazil, etc. We need to further deepen our trade agreement. Also, we need to build resilience against oil price shocks with the gradual shift to the renewables, with the diversification of the oil markets. Also, with regard to the employment, also there is need for the labor intensive manufacturing push. For example, in the textile sector, etc., what we can do, that we can provide more jobs in these regions, which can provide alternative sources for the formal employment. Also, skill industry alignment. Here I remember one of the quote which was given by the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, who said that India need skill census more than caste census. That if there will be a proper industry academia linkages, if we will properly go for a proper check of the skills that people will be having, probably we can provide them better jobs. Also, MSME credit and formalization support. For example, CDB is giving 59-minute loans. Also, CG, TMSE, etc., that are there to provide subsidized loans to the MSMEs, etc., to fulfill their working capital needs. All that needs to be expended. Along with that, for example, to boost consumption, government announced a pay commission under Justice Ranjana Desai. The first pay commission came in 1946, and till after that, every 10 years there is a pay commission that is announced to recommend the revision of the salaries, allowance and the pensions of the government employees. If that will be revised, if that will be increased, that will also lead to increase in the consumption expenditure, boost in demand, and that is also going to help in ensuring that we may see an increase in the salaries of the state government employees as well as private sector employees. So that will also lead to overall increase in the consumption expenditure. This is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Moving towards our simplified section, the first topic is norms for opening coal mines notified. This is related to your GS paper 3, mineral and energy resources, energy security, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 30. So the government has recently notified rules that dispense with the coal controller organization node for opening a particular coal mine, individual or section of a seam, and especially in a bid to boost the efficiency in the approval process for also hastening the overall coal output. Why? Because as per this report of energy statistics, which is released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, and this report of 2023, it says that more than 70% of India's energy needs, around 73%, is still fulfilled by the coal. And if the domestic sources for the coal will not fulfill the overall needs, we might have to import, and that might be much costlier as compared to the domestic coal. So to address that, government went with this particular changes. Also, the amendment entrusts the board of the concerned coal firm with the authority to accord the requisite persons, and this will also apply to the permission for the restarting mines which has been non-operational for 180 days or more. Also, notified rules mandate the board of that firm would be able to give approvals only after it receive the site approval from central or the state government or any statutory body. Also, the board would have to submit information to the coal controller organization about the opening of a particular mine. The coal ministry also expects firms to save up to 2 months in the operationalization of a mine. So this coal controller organization is a subordinate office under the Ministry of Coal, having various regional offices like in Delhi, Kolkata, Ranchi, etc. The core mandate of this coal controller organization is the coal and lignite data management, that is with regard to the production, dispatch and quality, data about the data of the public and the private mines, statistics related to that. For example, they release monthly data, they collect and publish various data with regard to the overall coal production, and also market oversight, that they ensure the fair production and quality surveillance, that the coal that is coming, they is having the appropriate quality for the use. Also, orderly commercial transactions they also do. The major functions of the coal controller organization is that it give approval on mining plan and mine closure plan under the Mine and Mineral Development Act of 1957, which was also amended in 2023. They also provide the permission for the opening and reopening of certain section, seam or mine for the coal and lignite under the Colliery Control Rules of 2004, which was also amended in 2021. And this organization is also responsible for the grading and analysis of coal mines to ensure the uniformity, and they also maintain standards under the Colliery and Control Rules of 2004, which was amended in 2021. And this organization also serves as an appellate authority, that they receives various objections against the grade disputes regarding the coal quality under the same Colliery Control Rules of 2004. Also, this organization play a crucial role in mine closure activities, that ensures that whenever the mining activity has already been done from a particular mine, the closing is done in a sustainable manner, so that in future it does not lead to any hazard to the human health. For example, the closing should be done environmentally in a sustainable manner and socially responsible manner. Also, it monitors the mine closure activity under the Colliery Rules of 2004. It also acts as a hearing authority in disputes regarding the acquisition of coal bearing land under the Coal Bearing Areas Acquisition and Development Act of 1957. And also it acts as commissioner for the payments under the coal mines. They also certifies the coal quantities which are eligible for the gasification rebates under the provision of Coal Mine Development and Production Agreement. And this is the area from where the 2022 question was asked, because this particular organization was constantly in news. Also, this is again government of India has also approved this single window clearance policy with the name of Coal Setu, that will provide transparent auctions for the long-term coal linkages for the industrial use and export, and this will boost the industrial growth. It will promote the washed coal and reduce the dependence on the import of the coal, and it will also strengthen the India's journey towards self-reliance as well as energy security. Next topic is UIDAI to expand full service Aadhar centers to 473 by September. This is said by the CEO of the UIDAI, that is Unique Identification Authority of India. And this is related to your GS paper 2, Government Policies and Interventions, e-governance, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 12. So here the UIDAI said that they will increase the number of full-fledged Aadhar enrollment centers and update centers for adults to 473 from the current 88 by September 26, so that the people who want certain changes in the personal details in the Aadhar, they can go for certain changes. The children can be enrolled for the Aadhar at the post office. Adult enrollees have fewer places to go. That only 88 number are there, 88 centers are there in whole India itself. And also, since adult applicants may have to travel past multiple districts to reach a center, the expansion will help them, as said by the CEO. Also, he said that such center will offer all modification and enrollment services. Some Aadhar details can be updated online, but changes in biometrics and updating one's name after a certain limit require visiting a particular center where a designated person with the proper ID, with the proper license, can go for certain changes after seeing your requisite document and the application, that why exactly you want to have certain changes. Also, number of adult enrollees is likely a small percentage of Indians, and that is the reason, even for a small percentage, that can translate to lack of population due to India's population, and that is the reason there is need to expand this enrollment centers. Also, he said that due to concerns of illegal immigrants, Aadhar has been issued in recent months only after field verification by the district administration. Also, the UIDAI is working on the integrity of data by restricting changes in the data of the birth of Aadhar card holders. If someone has two different date of births in two different documents, one is false. The CEO said people who had to change, they can change it only once in their lifetime. Also, by filing an affidavit that admitting a clerical mistake, by doing so, By doing so, twice will not be allowed. Also, the parents who have falsified their children's date of birth during Aadhar enrollment, they risk the criminal action. Also referring to a case in which Allahabad High Court has also ordered the filing of an FIR against a parent over an irregularity surrounding the child's date of birth. Now, what is this Aadhar? This is a 12-digit unique identification number which is issued by the UIDAI, and it is a statutory authority, you can say, having the legal backing of the Aadhar Act of 2016, having the headquarter in New Delhi, and it functions under the MITI, that is Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Also, the major functions of this UIDAI, that it issues the Aadhar, this Aadhar card or the Aadhar number. Also, it provides various authentication services, for example, biometric in the form of fingerprint, iris, and demographic authentication. It also enables the online verifications for the service delivery that is done. For example, KYC norms, etc., that has to be fulfilled at the banks, etc. Also, it provides for the digital and financial inclusion, that it also enables access to the direct benefit transfers, subsidies, and welfare schemes. And it also got its certain changes that needs to be done, that had to be done, especially after the Aadhar Act. That, for example, in K.S. Puttaswamy case, the Supreme Court recognized privacy as an intrinsic part of the Article 21 under Part 3, which provides for the fundamental rights. And they said that that privacy is a fundamental right, and they upheld Aadhar only for the state welfare purposes, disallowing its mandatory use for the private entities. And all the residents of India, including children, transgender, and differently abled person, can get Aadhar card. And it is a proof of residence, not proof of citizenship. The benefits is that it is valid all over India as proof of identity, as a proof of address. It can also help in opening bank account, get a mobile connection, get LPG connections and subsidies. Also, this is used for filing ITR, to get phone connection, to get gas connection, for online know your customer norms fulfillment, opening bank account, etc. Also, that whatever the Supreme Court verdict that was given under the K.S. Puttaswamy judgment, it was said that Aadhar has to be linked with the PAN and in ITR forms. It is still mandatory to avail welfare scheme benefits, for example, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, or even other benefits like whatever the pensions, etc., that are being given. It is mandatory to go with the Aadhar, because it helps in authentication or proper ensuring that there is no inclusion and exclusion error. The person who is mandated to get the benefits, they are only getting the benefits. Also, Aadhar is not mandatory for opening a bank account. If a person do not have, they do not have to provide Aadhar for the mobile connection. It is not mandatory. eKYC using Aadhar is not mandatory for the mobile wallets, especially under the payment banks. Also, it is not mandatory for school admissions. Also, it cannot be, the details cannot be disclosed in the name of national security. Individuals can also file a case under the Aadhar Act, and it is not mandatory for examination that are conducted by the public examination authorities like CBSE, UGC, and NET. Also, children cannot be denied benefits for the lack of Aadhar card. This is a question that was asked in 2018 related to Aadhar. This is a question that was asked in 2020 related to Aadhar card. So you people tell me the answer of these questions in the comment box. Again, one of the observation that you can see, that whatever the themes and the topics that are being asked by the UPSC in the previous year, they gets repeated. They are asking one question related to Aadhar in 18, and same they are asking in 2020. So this is a recommendation that I want to give to you people, a suggestion, that please analyze your PYQs properly. Whatever the themes and the topics that has been already asked in the previous years, they are very important for your upcoming years. Next topic is proud moment. The Gujarat regains tiger state status after 33 years, and this is related to your GS paper 3, conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, and this has appeared in today's The Indian Express, page number 9. So Gujarat has regained its status as tiger state after 33 years, with National Tiger Conservation Authority confirming the presence of a tiger in Ratan Mahal Wildlife Sanctuary in the central Gujarat, and also including the state in the National Tiger Census. Also, this a team of NTCA carried out a study in the Gujarat, and they confirmed the presence of a tiger in Ratan Mahal Wildlife Sanctuary in its primary report, and included Gujarat for the tiger census in India. Also, the camera traps, etc., that were used though there are various methods. For example, camera trap is there, pug mark technique is also used for the tiger census. So here the number of camera traps in the area has been increased, and also with the help of which we will be able to get an idea about the presence of the tiger. All antelopes and spotted deer were released in the area during the monsoon to also provide proper prey to the tigers which are available in those areas. Also, the minister in the Gujarat said that the constant efforts which are being taken by the Gujarat government for the conservation of the flora and fauna is one of the reason why we are witnessing this particular result. Also, last time in 1989 when the tiger census was conducted, officials spotted the pug marks of a tiger, but no tiger was seen. In 1992 tiger census, Gujarat was excluded and lost its status of the tiger state. Tiger state are the states having the tiger population. With the sighting of the tiger in 2019, the Mahisagar district, a ray of hope was raised, but it survived only for the 15 days. And now the minister is saying that it is a matter of joy. This National Tiger Conservation Authority is a statutory organization of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change that was formulated in 2005. And it is also in charge of the Project Tiger, which was launched in year 1972, and especially for the management of the tiger reserves and also for the conservation and protection of the tigers. It also provides, this NTCA provides policy framework, guidelines and action plans for implementing tiger conservation strategies, and also assessing the level of compliance about whatever the guidelines which were already framed. Also, it also frequently undertakes tiger census surveys and participates in improving the enforcement of the poaching regulations and also protection of the enhancement of the tiger habitats. Also, if you see this data from the tiger census of 2025, Madhya Pradesh is one of the state having the highest number of tiger population. Then we have the Karnataka, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. You people can also remember this information because there may be an increasing or decreasing order that can be asked from this particular tiger census related figures. Also, India is home to over 70% of world's wild tigers, and conservation efforts have helped in increasing the numbers to grow from 1411 in 2006 to 3682 in year 2022. Next topic is mediation, which is said to be a successful and cost-effective tool as per the Chief Justice of India. And this is related to your GS paper 2, Alternative Dispute Resolution, Judiciary and Indian Constitution. And this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 16. So, mediation is not a sign of the law's weakness, but rather its highest evolution. It was said by the CGI of India, and it is a true transition from culture of adjudication to a culture of participation where we cultivate harmony between the different parties. Also, he said that he took part in symbolic walk for mediation awareness near the Kala Academy in Panji, and he also added that the top court has also launched the Mediation for the Nation initiative, and it is not only for the consumer of justice but also for the direct stakeholders or the parties that are involved. And also, if you see the average disposal time in India and in Council of Europe, it is much high in India. The pendency of the cases, more than 4.5 lakh cases are pending across different courts. So mediation can be one of the alternate dispute resolution mechanism. There are some types of ADR mechanism. For example, one is arbitration, where a neutral tribunal will give a final binding award, and it is less formal than courts. There are relaxed rules, limited judicial role is there, and there is no appeal that lies against the arbitration, except in the rare cases where if there are certain conditions, for example, if there were certain facts etc which were not kept in mind during the arbitration, so in that case there may be a appeal that can be done. Also, it is mainly common in the commercial, international and infrastructure disputes. For example, with regard to the contract enforcement etc, this can be useful. Then we have the conciliation, where the third party will propose a solution. Parties may accept or reject. Settlement is binding only if both parties will accept it, and it is used in employment, consumer and commercial matters. It is less formal than arbitration. For example, if there is an issue with regard to the PF, if there is an issue with regard to the wages etc, so a third party can propose a solution, and if the employer and employee both will agree, then that will be accepted by both the parties, and that will help in ending the dispute. For example, there are two aspirants who are living in a same room, and one of the aspirants wants to study in the night and one of them wants to study in the day. So the person who wants to sleep in the night is getting disturbance because of the light, so they are having a dispute. So a third aspirant can come and he can propose a solution कि maximum the person who wants to study in the night will study till 11 or 12, and then after that both of you will try to sleep. So if both will accept, then that will be accepted. Then we have the mediation, where a facilitator will help parties communicate and reach agreement. Outcome will again be non-binding unless both will agree. So the person who will be acting as mediator should have the Supreme Court accreditation. That means at least the Supreme Court accreditation, that at least 40 hours of training, 10 settlements and 20 mediation he or she has already done. In that case, he might be getting the Supreme Court accreditation. Also, it is common in family, business and community disputes, for example, the disputes related to adoption, etc. Then we have the negotiation, where parties will settling disputes themselves through discussion. Most basic and widely used method, and it is used in the business, legal, diplomatic and everyday scenarios. For example, two aspirants, if they are discussing among themselves and they negotiated ki see, okay, this is the solution that we can work upon and that can help us in ending dispute, and we can concentrate on our studies. Next topic is Indus Water Treaty on hold. Green panels note for another hydel power project on Chenab. This is related to your GS paper 2, India and its neighborhood, groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interest. And this has appeared in today's Indian Express, page number 6. So especially amid the center's push to expedite the pending infrastructure project in the Indus Basin, the Environment Ministry and its expert appraisal committee gave various clearances for the 260 megawatt Dulhasti stage 2 project, which is located on the Chenab river in the Kishtwar district of Jammu and Kashmir, and it is a hydroelectric power project. And this Indus Water Treaty, which was brokered by World Bank and it was signed in 1960, that allocates the eastern and western rivers of the Indus Basin. For example, eastern river like for India, Ravi, Byas and Satluj, the consumption, irrigation and hydroelectric projects India can build without any restriction. For remembering these tributaries of the Indus, you can remember with the help of a mnemonic, batsman Rohit Sharma, BRS. The western rivers whose control Pakistan is having, Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. India retained some of the limited rights for the specific uses. For example, primary use rights of these rivers are allocated to the Pakistan. Some of the rights are given to India, and the flow of the water should not be restricted. India's limited rights on the western rivers are for non-consumptive purpose such as hydroelectric projects, storage and limited irrigation purposes. Establishment of permanent Indus Commission was also done by the Indus Water Treaty that comprises representatives from both India and Pakistan. They also meet regularly to exchange data, address disputes and also to ensure compliance with the treaty obligations, right? Also, you can see that there are other projects that are already there on the Chenab Basin. For example, there is this, apart from this Dulhasti 2nd, there is Dulhasti 1, and there is also other projects, for example, Ratal, Khiru, Kwar, and then also we have the Pakal Dul that is there under the stretch of Mandsaur river. And these are certain hydroelectric projects that are helping in getting the proper utilization of this particular Indus Water Treaty. This is all from today's Analyst. Thank you very much. All the very best. Keep studying.